2009, when the Obama administration was coming into office, they launched 7 high-profile U.S.-China initiatives focusing specifically on clean energy and climate change. And of course, the U.S. and China have been cooperating for a long time on energy issues, but this was really the first time that that was elevated to a higher level of the bilateral discussion. So, as you mentioned, climate change now comes up in sort of meetings of heads of state all around the world. It's a top 3 issue in the U.S.-China relationship as well. And so in the strategic and economic dialogues and all the, every time that the presidents have had a chance to meet over the last 7 years or so leading up to the Paris meeting, climate change was very, front and center of that agenda. And I think the reason for that is it's one of the few areas where we actually have a very constructive dialogue with China. The launch of the Climate Change Working Group in 2013 was really the first time that we had this sort of bilateral, high-level interaction on these issues directly related to the negotiations. The U.S. and China for many years had not been in agreement on climate change. It had been, yet another issue where we had a lot of strain and tension. You could put it up there with the South China Sea and cybersecurity, but that's very different today. When you're in strategic conversations between the United States and China, climate change is one of the few areas where I think we have more of our interests are aligned. We have more in common in terms of what both countries want to achieve for different reasons, but domestically in different ways that these policies are being carried out domestically. But I think it is this relationship which did play a really important role in carrying the global conversation because these are still the 2 largest emitters. And even with, I think, the fracturing of the G77, of course, China plays a really important role still in these negotiations. And I think China has really embraced the opportunity to be a leader in these meetings. Again, thinking back to Copenhagen, for those of you who followed that, you may recall in the press, China was really called out as not necessarily a constructive player there. And whether or not that was fair, I think the leadership really wanted to make sure that didn't happen again. And so the 2014 announcement, the joint announcement between the U.S. and China was a chance for the Chinese leadership and the U.S. leadership to get out in front of the Paris negotiations and say, we are committed to this. These are our pledges going forward. And the targets that they announced in November 2014 became the basis for the INDCs, which are now enshrined in the Paris Agreement. So I do think this momentum was crucial. I think the bilateral relationship has really improved over the last few years, and I think there's still a ways to go. And I think the most recent presidential statement hints at some of the issues that are on the horizon. One of the biggest, I think, being climate finance, sort of within the climate agreement, but also much more broadly in terms of development financing, role of new development banks and other overseas investment, and the role that China and the U.S. will play in that going forward, I think is a really interesting focus could be an interesting focus of conversations going forward.